Welcome to Standing on My Soapbox, the podcast where we talk about the more serious side of topics, such as politics, religion, minority rights, or things we want to just take a bit more of a deep dive into. Join us here on Fridays, as part of Left of Straight Podcasts, and be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. Now jump up on my soapbox with me and let's start talking.
Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the Left of Straight podcast. I'm excited to bring back one of my favorite podcasts that I used to do back in 2019, 2018, called Standing on My Soapbox. Standing on My Soapbox is kind of a place to go outside of the general realm of the Left of Straight show interviews, where I talk about entertainment, foodies, books, music, all that fun stuff, with some excellent interviews with celebrities and personalities from all over. Standing on My Soapbox is a little more for the serious issue, things that we might need to get a little more in depth on. So I'm bringing back Standing on My Soapbox this season 7 in 2024 for a couple of reasons. It's a political season. We have a presidential race going up. And of course, democracy itself is on the line. LGBTQ rights has never been more in peril. So I think it's important that we have a more serious place to talk. I love doing my entertainment interviews, but Standing on My Soapbox is going to let us talk a little bit more about politics, about religion, about minority rights, about all sorts of issues that we might want to go into a little deeper subject on. We're going to start it off now with a issue that's very important to the U.S. right now: immigration. Immigration is a huge hot topic button here in the U.S. Of course, Republicans using it as a wedge issue. They usually do. And immigration has been a problem. The U.S. is having a crisis on the border. Even the current administration, Biden's administration, is saying so. We're having a record number of people coming to the country. It's a problem as in what to do with them when they get here. It's not like they don't work hard. It's not like they're not coming from stories that are essential that they need to get out of where they're living now. That has nothing to do with it. It's just the system to bring this many people over. Sometimes there's 50,000, 6,000 crossings a day. And how do you cope with that many people? So I had the chance, if you don't know about SlamDance is a festival that goes on the same time as in Park City, Utah, as the Sundance Film Festival does. And SlamDance is for more independent films. And I had a chance to talk last week to a great documentary. He does documentaries, he does music videos, he does commercials. Great eye. His name is Steph Grasso from Canada. And he created this amazing multimedia piece called Migrant Sea. And it carries on primarily about the migrant situation from Africa to Italy, where he spent part of his time growing up. So it's a little different here from the U.S., but it's an amazing piece of documentary work where it's multimedia. There's stories from the migrants' point of view. There's audio stories. There's video stories. There's interactive maps where you can see where they traveled from in Africa to get to Italy. There's stories about their housing there and how they still face racism. I thought it was a fascinating documentary. Didn't have too much time to talk to Stef. He was in a press day, so we had 20 minutes to talk. I wanted to share that with you to kick off Standing on My Soapbox. We're going to be back on Fridays. I have great issues coming up in politics and some great guests to talk to. If you're interested, give us an email. Let me know if you're interested in what issue you'd like to see, and we will address it right here on Standing on My Soapbox. Enjoy the first episode, everyone, and please subscribe and enjoy all 5 days a week of Left of Straight Podcast. We appreciate you. Have a good day. Hey guys, Canadian filmmaker Steph Grasso is a remarkable creator and artist whose work is increasingly focused on poignant and socially relevant themes. His multimedia documentary series, Migrant Sea, showcases his unique ability to blend storytelling with impactful real-world issues. The series brings to life the harrowing journeys and experience of African migrants, offering a platform for the voices and stories that often remain unheard. Migrant Sea is currently being featured at the SlamDance Festival in Park City. Take a look. There you go. welcome, Steph. Thanks for coming on the show. How you doing today?
Pretty good. I just spent like I think 20 hours on a plane, so I'm a bit drowsy, but I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Always fun. I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, you've done some great work, my friend, from beautifully shot commercials to music videos to films.
Oh,
Even your Instagram's a work of art. So very impressed.
thank you. Thank you for checking those out, actually.
Oh, I love it. I've been checking out the website and kind of going through everything. It's amazing. I mean, immigration's always been such a wedge issue here in the US, especially with another presidential election coming up. Talk about
Yeah.
what drew you to this plight exactly. What drew you to the plight in Africa and kind of what compelled you to make this multimedia documentary?
Uh, yeah, this is going to be a long-winded answer, but yeah. So I am, as I said, I'm half French, half Italian. Grew up in Canada. I spent a lot of time in Italy growing up with my family, like months out of every year. So one thing that's been that I noticed, all throughout my childhood, namely since the late '90s, is that you would see African migrants crossing the Mediterranean. So search and rescue operations going in and picking them up and bringing them to Italy. And then you saw like increasingly in Italy, which was very like uh, homogenic like culture. It's like it was very white, becoming more and more diverse, and more Africans in the country as I was growing up. Which was also of note because I like sort of grew up within like a Haitian community. I've always had like lots of Haitian friends and African friends. And so that's something that I found remarkable because it's something that we kept hearing about in Italy, but it wasn't really being talked about sort of in the global media until 2015, 2014, 2015. Um, Now, in 2015, that's when sort of there was a lot of media coverage about the Mediterranean migrant crisis. And that's when sort of things started to really hit me, namely because the way that it was covered was about basically migrants being rescued in the Mediterranean. And
Right,
the issue with that was that there wasn't really a difference being made between refugees coming in from like Syria and Afghanistan and Iraq. They were crossing over from like the Balkans and Greece.
right,
And then there's the sub-Saharan African migrants that come from like 13 different countries, like all these different, everybody has their different reasons for coming. Could be like climate, social, political, all these things. And they cross the Sahara Desert, generally go to Libya and then or Morocco and mostly Libya, and then they cross to Italy that way. Uh, these are two very, very different things. And in 2015, it really hit me that they were sort of being treated under this umbrella term. And I thought that was like really problematic. And in the sense that it's like the Syrian civil war is absolute disaster. It's
right,
horrible. But the stories that you would hear a lot were of refugees. So basically saying it's like, well, we have to flee our country, but we'd like to go back, provided that it sort of stabilizes one day. But they're really like fleeing conflict, but that's completely different from these African migrants because there's no like one push factor for them. And as I said, it had been going on for like most of my life, and honestly, it's never going to end. And so that hit me that it was sort of portrayed in a pretty superficial way in that respect. And the other thing that really impacted me is that it was really sort of always told through the sort of like Western lens, sort of.
right,
So the media sort of like inside looking out. There's a term that we call like fortress Europe, and there's aspects of this in the United States as well, sort of looking at migrants or refugees as like sort of these hordes or these people coming into our country, right?
right.
Um, And I thought that was a real problem because what was missing from that coverage and those types of stories, which really dominate to this day coverage of migration, was like those people's voices and stories and perspectives. And that really worried me. Combined with the fact that like I married a human rights lawyer and she had actually worked on issues as well. So she brought that back to my attention and she was like, yeah, there's nothing really, oh, we don't really hear their stories as told by them. And by that point, I had also been working with NGOs for many years,
Right.
making documentaries with them. And I had actually started developing a similar approach where I was like, because with NGOs, you're looking for funding a lot of the time. So the docs need to be like quick and about people. But I had started developing these ways of making docs that are more collaborative because I really wanted it was like I wanted people to share their stories with us, but I also, on one hand, I wanted to work with them to make sure that their voices and their perspectives were like authentically a part of it. So I really wanted to do something a bit more collaborative. So that's sort of how Migrant Sea came into being.
Well, I love that, and
Yeah,
that kind of leads me to my next question that I had in a second. But I just think the whole entire the way you did the multimedia, seeing the journey. I mean, you show the maps of the journey of how far these people went. I didn't know about the racism aspect as much of it until I saw the Casa Federica profile, which was amazing. But my next question
oh,
really
cool.
was, how do you approach the storytelling documentary to ensure it was both engaging and respectful to the participants?
So, I mean, engaging, I sort of trusted that these stories would be engaging. Um, in terms of making sure that they would be respectful, like I said, at that point, I had already sort of been doing similar projects. And so by the time I went into filming or even just preparing Migrant Sea, I'd sort of developed these broad ethical frameworks of how to approach projects where I would like make films with survivors like these migrants. I make a point of calling them like survivors and collaborators because I think too often we sort of portray them as victims of trauma, but no, they're survivors. Like
Good
they've
point.
survived things that arguably I don't know, survived their journeys. And so yeah, sort of developed this ethical framework, this way of sort of like collaborating with them. And what I would do was because of the multimedia aspect, I was able to go and when I would introduce the project to them, I would first like talk about the project, see what they were willing to share, and immediately because we were filming this project and like we were making photo docs and video docs and VR docs and audio docs, I was able to sort of hand over some control about like their own stories to them immediately in the sense
Right.
that it's like, well, tell me what you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with a video camera, because it's a little weird, like if you want to do a photo doc, if you don't want your face shown, or there's like security issues, we could do an audio doc, or like or yeah, if you don't mind video but you want something a bit less invasive, we could do a VR doc because that's really really simple. So from the get-go, I was able to sort of engage in that way. Like the whole point of the project, like I was telling them, is that I want you to be able to tell your story and I
Right.
want the project to reflect that, to embody that. And immediately I was able to sort of like hand over some control to them. And then later on in the process, that sort of was reflected all throughout filming and even in post-production. I always make a point to send like rough versions to the participants, to the migrants, so they can review it and sort of like offer some feedback if they feel that it's like not just inaccurate, that's not the issue, but more like inauthentic I've been fortunate so far. Everybody's been really happy from the get-go, but I really want to make sure that it, like, when they feel heard and they feel seen, and that they feel when they watch the doc, that they're like, no, no, this is me. This is like a really accurate representation of like my story and what I wanted to express. So
I love
yeah,
that, and I think it was laid out so well on the website, the way you kind of show those different elements of it, the audio doc, them talking. It's I thought it was very respectful and very just poignant. Hearing it in their own voices was amazing. Was there any particular memorable moment during filming that kind of stuck out to you? I mean, you have 7 wonderful stories there. Anything that kind of hit your hot button most of all?
uh, yeah. Well, I'm gonna first off, we filmed a lot more stories, and one thing that I'd like to mention about Migrant Sea is that it's an evolving project. So we actually have stories that aren't there yet, and if you go on the website like in a year, it's going to be different than it is now. There's going to be even more stories, more
I love that.
content.
Yeah.
So always told in the same sort of style. We have like a lot of really cool ones coming up. In terms of something that hit me, I mean, honestly, all of these stories were just devastating. I can tell you that, yeah, it really it stayed with me. I mean, it stayed with me to this day, but like especially after sort of wrapping filming, just like the stories would just sort of inhabit you. Uh, yeah. One of them, but this is like I don't want to compare the stories because they're all
Of
like,
course, sure. Right.
but the one that I just found unbelievable, but that's just like, which is, but it's true. It was our actually our anonymous audio doc. We had to keep anonymous because so he was a migrant from the Gambia, and he made his way through the Sahara and to Libya. And when they made the crossing, uh, uh, they were on the boat, and at one point, it's sort of I can't get into like the whole way that the smugglers bring like have them cross over. But basically,
Right.
at one point, the smugglers dropped them sort of in the middle of the Mediterranean, and they told, "Okay, you hold like you're basically steering this thing the rest of the way." So, and they didn't give him much of a choice. Like they were all going to die if he didn't do that. So he did it, but because of that, Italian authorities they spotted him as driving the boat. And so but when he went to Italy, he was basically accused of being a smuggler. So he
Yeah,
went
I saw
through
that. That
all this
was
legal process of having to deal with that and like sort of prove that he wasn't. And at the same time, he fell in love with like an aid worker, an Italian aid worker, and they're married now. They have a baby actually
Oh,
now
wow.
since filming. Yeah, it's such a wild story. And even him, like back in the desert, for example, he also had the craziest Saharan crossing story because he fell off of the truck. So in the Sahara, they go for like hundreds of miles on the back of
Right.
these Toyota Hilux pickup trucks. And he fell off in the middle of the desert, and he just hiked and somehow survived. And anyhow, so his story was really, really wild just because he went through like a
That was
lot.
one of the
And
3 I watched. I mean, I watched the like I said,
it's
the
the
Casa
audio one,
Federica.
audio.
Yeah, it was fascinating. The Casa Federica I saw the Jenny one, all 3 amazing. We gotta wrap this up, which I'm so sad because I have so
Of
many
course.
other questions to ask you, but you're at the festival now. You have lots of interviews ahead of you, I'm sure. Talk about what your hope is that they can take away from this, the listeners, either at SlamDance or when they check out the beautiful website, and give the web address for the website so people can check it out and watch this evolving story unfold.
Yeah, so my plug is the project is called Migrant Sea, so like Migrant Sea, and the website is simple. It's migrantsea.com. So migrant, MigrantCSEA. And yeah, so it's a multimedia documentary, like as we just described. The takeaway that I want people to have, whether audiences at SlamDance or your audience, it's I want people to have like a more intimate understanding of these people as human beings, because like I said, I think too often sort of we see them as masses and sort of like as dehumanized, and I think that's really that's very incomplete. Well, that's problematic and superficial. But I think without that essential piece of like hearing them tell their own stories in their own words, uh, yeah, we can't connect with people on an intimate level. And I think that's really essential to sort of understanding the stakes, and also sort of welcoming people and accepting people as our friends, neighbors, relatives. And yeah, migration is like the story of the future. It's one of the stories of the one of the most important stories that we're going to sort of live with for all of our lives.
Well
And I
said.
think
I
it's
agree
really important that
100%.
we
Like I said, in the US, it's a huge issue right now,
yeah,
along with trafficking and everything. So, such an important light you've shined on this. I appreciate it. We have to have you back sometime and talk about your entire career. Like I said, some beautiful
with pleasure.
photography and everything. But I appreciate your time today. Steph Grasso, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank
And
you.
congratulations for all the great work, and have fun at SlamDance.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast distributor, and please give us a 5-star rating so more listeners can find us. You can follow us on social media, and be sure to check out our website for contests and other news and information. See you next week.